Greetings, comic enthusiasts here. Welcome to IMPERIUS REX. I'm Dinosaur Neil.
And I'm Ghost Hunter Dave.
And today, we're talking about From Hell.
So Neil, thanks for joining us.
You're very welcome. Yet again, another book. It's too spooky for Troy to the max to read.
That's right. Another black and white tome.
Yep, exactly.
Another big pair of titties.
A very big pair of titties.
That's how we do it.
We do it.
We're nothing if not consistent.
Exactly.
So, Neil, we polled our YouTube channel a ways back on which Alan Moore adventure should we cover.
Yeah.
Should it be League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
Ooh.
Or should it be From Hell?
Yes.
And I have to say, it was the closest poll we've ever had.
Yeah.
Go on.
Would you have it that I expected League to become leaps and bounds over this thing?
Me too.
And what an underdog From Hell would have been. But everyone in the comments was like, From Hell is amazing. You should definitely read it. And by God,
we did.
We
read them both.
We sure did.
So you're welcome.
You're welcome.
League edged it out by 4% vote. Had a lot of participants in this, but as you said, there was an overwhelming request for From Hell. Mm-hmm. Many people saying, not only is it one of Alan Moore's best books, it is his best book.
So what a proclamation.
Yes. So this just... this tripped my trigger. I wanted to read this again. I haven't read it since high school.
This is a first read-through for me.
And then what really sealed the deal was you were over at our house one night. You said you had a bottle of absinthe. And I was like, I think they do absinthe in From Hell.
The movie, they sure do.
I forgot it wasn't in the book. But I was like, let's read From Hell. Here,
let's do it.
Read this giant phone book in 2 weeks.
Oh, you got it.
And we'll do it. Turns out they don't do any absinthe in that. So I guess we're going to talk about the movie as well.
But we do have absinthe.
That's right.
We're chasing the dragon here today, folks. And
that's opium.
That's true.
Sorry.
We aren't doing opium.
We don't have any opium.
But we're not. This is absinthe, laudanum free.
That's right. So
watch him. I'll wait.
So From Hell is the 10-issue graphic novel chronicling the 1888 Jack the Ripper murders straight out of Whitechapel.
Oh, yeah.
Brought to you, and me, and you at home, from the legendary team of Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. So one thing right off the bat, all these chapters are of varying lengths. Very
much so. At first, it is like your typical, what you'd think of as like a volume length or a chapter length. And then there's one in the middle that is probably double the length.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, and then the next one after is pretty short. But like, I love the way that they did it this way because they're all very different from themselves. Like they all tell this big long story, but there are time jumps in between, and all of them have a nice, concise, clear thing that they're trying to portray for the overarching story.
Right. And this was originally published chapter by chapter in Taboo magazine.
Wow.
In 1989. Before it finished, it was actually shopped around to different publishers. And finally, Top Shelf Productions is the one that collected the entire volume in 1999.
Oof.
So I wonder, like, how weird would it have been to read these serialized at that time? Where, like, sometimes it was, like, a year between issues.
Yeah.
And then it might jump to a whole different magazine entirely. Like, how could you make heads or tails of this as it was originally released?
I don't think, like, if it didn't come out like a week-to-week thing or something like that, that would be so hard to track and follow. Especially because there's so much packed into each one of these volume and chapters. Like, it's ridiculous.
But I feel like that also adds to its benefit because each chapter is almost kind of like its own individual piece of the overall mystery where you don't need to read it all at once. You just get like these little snippets that make up the whole.
Right.
If we can go back to the beginning.
Yeah, let's.
This book starts at the end.
Yes.
It opens with two old men walking on the beach.
Sure does.
One, Inspector Aberline of the Scotland Yard, respectively. And his... and his friend, Robert Lees, a psychic, give or take, and former spiritual advisor to the Queen.
Her Majesty herself.
Her Royal Majesty, the Queen of England. I think the biggest takeaway right off the bat in this like chapter 1/prologue is before you know any of these characters, Mr. Lee admits that all of his visions, his psychic visions, were made up.
Yes.
He just faked them. He'd convulse on the ground in fake seizures. Sometimes he'd piss himself.
For a little added show.
A little extra.
Yeah, a little extra.
But I think the biggest takeaway of this is he says, I made it all up, but they came true anyway. Yes.
Now, maybe I don't know if you want to touch on this now, but like the end, the epilogue. The epilogue is like a direct from the prologue.
Yeah.
So it's the old men back on the beach and whatever.
Yep.
And like they go on to say other things that like make you believe that like, yeah, he says he's making it all up, but like
maybe he's a real good guesser.
Maybe is he? Or it's like, is this the one weird supernatural element? Because like he's talking about how he's like, oh, I feel another war coming, and it's it's like 1880, right before World War I.
Yes.
So it's like, holy shit, is he kind of actually telling the truth?
Like, I like that idea that this psychic thinks he's making it up, but like maybe he is psychic.
Exactly.
Like, it's not happening anyway. He just is foretelling it.
Exactly.
And I like that, but it doesn't play a huge role in this book either, because it's not really a supernatural book.
No.
As you would imagine, like a Jack the Ripper book isn't. It's fairly historically accurate, at least as much as you could...
And an interpretation of actual real history.
Yes. So we kick it off with that, and you're like, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
And then they kind of make a mention that they basically allowed a murderous conspiracy to run unpunished.
Yes.
And then we travel back to 1888, Whitechapel, London, and the story kicks off.
Yeah.
And right off the bat, you're like, who are these people? What is going on? I warned you going in. I was like,
you sure
maybe
were.
you should watch the movie first.
Well,
but then after a couple chapters, I was like, oh no, okay, I'm getting the hang of it too. Like, we'll get there.
I would say the first two chapters, it's really just setting up why this stuff is happening in the first place, why Jack the Ripper comes to fruition in the first place.
The motive.
The motive for it. And I think I ended up personally really liking that they drew out the whole front of this book with things that like aren't consequential to it. It's a big world building thing on why it's going to end up happening how it does, but it's like it's not. It could have been summed up in a paragraph, for God's sakes. But I like how they went through all this. I think it made it more impactful when you see things down the road, because this book does have a lot of good callbacks to it.
Yeah.
That if you're really paying attention, like they hit harder as you continue to go on.
Yeah. Alan is not concerned about making a super like dramatic, action-packed telling. He's just saying, like, this is what happened. Historically, these people were in this place at this time.
Yes.
And then these events happened, so we can theorize this led to that.
Right.
And it starts off with Prince Eddie, who is Edward Albert Victor, the grandson of the Queen of England, Queen Victoria. The Duke, yes. Yep. He had a child and a secret wedding with a Annie Crook.
Yep, Annie Crook from the candy shop.
Yep, a shop girl and sometimes prostitute.
Yes.
Which apparently all the women in Whitechapel were.
As you would guess, as you would assume from this book,
any lower class woman just was a prostitute by default, apparently, at this time.
Exactly. And this obviously takes place, like, 1888, East End of London, like, it's a dirty place to be, and it's not like
place to be.
Yeah, you got gangs amok, like
the Nichols gang.
The Nichols gang, you don't like the police.
10 pounds a week.
Wowza! Holy cow!
No one can hook that much.
No, buddy, not even a group of gals.
Oh, your cunny would be roadkill.
Yuck! A lot of things are going to go overseen. There's a lot of just like the police
essentially no law enforcement.
Exactly. The police are pretty lenient, like, oh, it's just a lady of the night kind of a thing.
Yeah.
What happens, what happens.
Bugger off, lass.
Yeah. They don't arrest them for doing what they do, but they also don't look after if something happens to them kind of a thing.
Nope. So while all this is happening with Prince Eddie and Annie, there is an attempt to cover up this scandal that could potentially tarnish the royal crown. And Queen Victoria appoints her royal physician, a Sir William Gull, to see to the matter.
Oh, yes.
And old Willie Gull is a few screws loose.
Boy, is he.
My word.
Oh, boy. And holy cow, I gotta say, the chapter that introduces old Willie Gull has to be one of my favorites in the entire book. It's probably, what, chapter 3 or 4?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
It's pretty close to the beginning. But what happens in the way it's done is it's all like from his point of view. So
through his eyes.
Through his eyes, you see his hands doing the things he wants to do as he's growing up, becoming like
and he's a physician. So hands are a very...
His big, meaty digits.
They're appropriate personification.
Yeah, exactly. What's interesting is this whole chapter is done through his eyes except for like the very end where it kind of introduces who he actually is.
Yep.
And it's such an interesting way to go about it.
Yeah, more basically kind of recounts his entire life, or at least prominent points. And you really get the feeling like, this is a smart dude, but he's got some issues.
Yeah.
He's very fascinated by death.
Yes.
And science in the body.
The first thing you come of him is when he finds like a dead mouse or rat, and he just starts cutting it up like in the middle of the forest or whatever.
Yep. And his own father dies, and he's just like messing with the corpse there on the table.
Yep.
You also realize he has kind of an agenda against women, which definitely plays a role going forward.
It does. He's trying to make the world right. And
a lot of that is like his own Masonic upbringing and his own beliefs, spiritual.
Yes.
And, he's into some shit.
He's a dirty character by today's standards for sure.
Yes. So Willie just proceeds to carve a bloody path through Whitechapel, eliminating all of the women who knew about the secret marriage and child. We also begin to learn that William is more interested in preserving his own radical Masonic ideals than he is actually covering up the scandal.
Very much so.
And he just leaves all these symbolic messages among the bloody tapestry that he paints about London.
Absolutely. And he goes into great detail about this. I would say one of my also second favorite chapters that I had to instantly message you about is like he has this carriage driver, old Netley. Oh, Netley.
Netley's guts are all wrong.
Oh my God, poor Netley. This guy
had some stones. I can see why Troy didn't want to get on this. It's a little too close to home.
But so William Gull gets into the whole Freemason stuff. Like, that's his upbringing. He's entrenched, and he would say he's probably one of the best among them, and they might maybe say that too.
He has no peers.
No, he has no peers here. And the whole chapter is him having Netley take him around all of London to show him all of the Masonic sites of like the obelisks and
Cleopatra's Needle.
Yeah, exactly. And he goes into very, very gross amounts of detail on describing their importance to the Masonic Temple, or why they are important to the specific type of god and how they're inferior to his Masonic god. Like, it is a ridiculous chapter, and what sums it all up and almost makes the reader want to do too is, through Netley's eyes, you're just getting this overload of information.
Fire hose of information.
And he just vomits at the end of this, and you're like, I kind of want to too, because this is just so heavy, so deep.
And what's interesting is all of this, for the most part, is real. Like, it's all historically accurate in terms of what these structures and symbols represent.
Exactly.
And it's amazing how many, like, hidden symbols and symbology exist even today, from what was like originally created back at that time, and why it was created, like what those represented. He wants to send a message, basically. And that message is that the male fire needs to subdue the unconscious female deities that once had control over Europe.
Yeah.
Before the age of science and reason came. So he's a very scientific man.
Right.
That he believed the Masons were very scientific while spiritually based. And he wants to just eliminate this, like, free-thinking, like, left-brain idealism.
Very much
bring in, like, an age of reason.
He does. He goes all the way back to, like, Paleological times. He's like, when cavemen around women, they were the ones who gave birth. They did everything around, but they were like, but no more, I say. Down with them. And reading it now, but I guess it's Alan Moore's, you know, obviously writing this in terms of 1888. But now you'd just be like, oh, holy shit, Alan! Like, this is crazy because, like...
You know, I think Alan's a pretty feminist writer.
Right, exactly.
But, I mean, he's right. And he uses that to his advantage by writing about very unkind times to women.
Yeah, very, very true. And what William Gall's all about, essentially, is just like, women had it good for long enough.
Yeah.
It's men's time. We've only had but a brief blink of control over this world, and we want to take it for our own, and you're just like... Come on, man.
So he's almost like enacting like a sigil or like a spell across London where as they're going from landmark to landmark, he's asking Netley to like mark it on the map and it makes a pentagram.
Yes.
Or a pentacle, I think he calls it.
Yes.
And that is like this ritual that he's hoping to just instill with this belief.
Yes.
It's almost like something Grant Morrison would conjure up here. Where it's just another layer of like, let's overpower, let's oppress this female deity.
Which is probably why he was tickled pink at the Queen's decree that he go silence all of these ladies of the night.
I can cut some bitches.
Yeah, I'll cut their necks.
Yeah. Another fun fact about old Willie Gull, he had a massive stroke a while back.
Oh, did he ever?
And it was at that moment that he saw God and believed God gave him this mission. The Grand Architect told him to send a message. So everything he's doing, he's believing that it was the will of God.
Yes. But really, his brain probably just hemorrhaged, and now he's having a big problem.
But in that time, they were like, well, maybe he was touched by the Lord. Let's send him off.
Yeah, let's make him do the Queen's bidding. Why not? Yeah.
Oh, man, the age of reason indeed.
Oh, boy, is it ever.
So that's just like the beginning. That's the first couple chapters. And you're thinking like, wow, this is telling you right off the bat who the killer is.
Yes.
Very different from the movie, which I first saw before reading this. I was like, oh, they're just laying it all out here right now.
Right.
So Inspector Aberline doesn't come till way later.
Right.
Until the first of 4 or 5 of the witnesses are murdered by him.
Right.
And this is just a hodgepodge group of friends and women of the night who are just unfortunate souls doing anything they can to get by in just probably the worst conditions in the world.
And if they didn't have it bad enough already that, like, they were about to be serial killed by Jack the Ripper, they had to worry about... finding a place to stay every single night. Getting their DOS money.
They
damn
need that
DOS.
Whatever the hell that is.
I don't know what the fuck DOS money is.
DOS money.
But they're always worried that, like, if the Nichols gang doesn't kill them or they aren't finding a place to rest at night...
Or their cunnies wrecked beyond repair.
Cunnies all wrecked. That's why they're sticking it between their thighs. Holy shit.
Man. It's almost a blessing. To get murdered at this point.
Exactly. I'm like,
just put everyone in this city out of their misery.
Yes.
Good Lord,
my goodness. Oh, it's such a nasty place.
So I do like that at this point we get Aberline in here, and he made his name in Whitechapel.
Yeah, he was a policeman
he got
on
out
the beat.
There.
He was a beat policeman.
Yes.
Yeah, and he's like, I never want to come back.
Out of there. And then they're like, murder in Whitechapel? We have just the man for the job. And he's like... Fuck!
Oh, Scotland Yard, you sons of bitches! You're sending me back into Whitechapel!
And he says, like, there's no law and order there, and you can't reason with them. It's not a society. Like, how can you enforce anything on people that are already in the worst conditions?
Exactly.
So it's like, it's just chaos.
Not to mention that he's got this whole higher power as well, pulling the strings from above and just making a mess of the situation even more than it would have been anyway.
Sir Charles Warren, I believe, is the chief of police. Who is kind of...
one of the Masonic leaders, kind of,
yes, and like forced into letting Gull operate and do this thing. There's a lot of people that are, Queen says I can do it. Sorry, I'm gonna go carve up these women. Got a note from the Queen, I can do it. And they're like, let me see. Okay, checks out. Don't make too big a mess of things. He's like, I'm gonna. And you're like, well,
okay.
Bugger.
I do love how patient and polite the Queen actually seems to be. Never in a different pose other than sitting like 3/4 view, like at a table. Exactly like that. And she's just like, oh, terrible mess Mr. Gull's making, but carry on. These holes need to go.
Toodle pip. Among all of the women that are targeted by Gull, I guess our main heroine is Mary Kelly.
Yes.
Who is a young Irish girl. She wants nothing more than to go back to her Irish homeland and raise some kids. But, you know, she's the one that kind of pulls at your heartstrings, even though none of the characters are terribly likable. You know, they're just, they're victims of their circumstance.
Very much
all
so.
Drinkers, and...
a lot of the times you are, like, you want to root for these ladies, and, like, they're in a terrible situation, but some of them are just in this condition where it's like, well, I can't live without being drunk, so I'm going to get drunk, and that's how life is.
Old Dark Annie.
Oh, Dark
Can we talk about Dark Annie for a minute?
Yes, we can.
Just a real piece of work.
Oh,
Dark
my God.
Annie.
She's an old battle axe.
She is. Always borrowing soap.
Yes!
From the other women.
Oh, boy, and she punches that guy right in his mouth.
Yup. And then, like, just lying about some of the other women, too, to make them look bad. She just has a chip on her shoulder.
She sure does.
Which elicits one of my favorite lines in the whole thing, is when one of these women, one of her friends, has just had enough of her, and she says, "Come on, you fat old shitbag. You think you're tough?" And then she just punches her right in the mush.
Oh, God, yeah.
Just turns her face to paste.
Sure does.
And then Dark Annie's sent packing right into the arms of William Gull.
Oh, yeah. Slices her up.
Brings her in with a bushel of grapes, which is what she lures all the ladies. What he lures all the ladies in with. Yeah. Laced in laudanum.
Yep. Yeah, so, yeah. And that's actually kind of a weird plot point. And that one you'd not think of in today's time. Like, grapes are like this thing of, like, only rich people are getting grapes. But they're doused in laudanum.
Oh, boy.
And that kind of, like, lulls them in the sense of security. And guess what? They're getting their necks sliced so you can't hear them scream.
From right to left.
Right to left.
Or left to right. I can't remember which one.
Whichever the way the Masonic temple told them to do so. But one by one, all the ladies kind of get hack and slashed all their way through. But it gets to the point where there is one of them, actually, or another Lady of the Night uses a fake name. Or, like, gives herself, like, a name of one of the other ladies.
There's a switcheroo with Mary Kelly and another one.
Yeah.
Where you are led to believe that Mary Kelly is just butchered. Horrendously in her bed.
It's actually the worst one in the entire book.
It's the last, so he has to go out with a bang. And it's a full chapter, basically, him
just carving her up. And this is where you kind of get into the insanity of William Gull as well. Where you see him, like, having visions, like he appears in a different spot.
He feels like he's teaching, or he's being judged by the Masons. Or he even traverses time and space and sees forward in the future to the 20th century.
Yeah, there is
which is really interesting.
It's very interesting. And there's a panel where he and Netley are walking along, like, scouting out an area, and he looks over and he sees a guy, like, watching television.
Yeah, and the guy sees him, and he sees him, and I remember the first time I read this, I had to do, like, a double take, and I was like, wait a minute!
I examined that page so hardcore!
Why is there a TV?
Yeah, like, what the fuck just happened? But it all kind of comes back that, like, this is, like, the point where he's having, like, the stroke has taken full effect. Yes. He's having a mental breakdown. And he's slicing up this woman, and it's just, like, if this were in color, you would be vomiting. Like, it is disgusting.
Fun fact, they just recently released a full-color version of this book. It's on Comixology, and I debated which one to read, and I started reading the color one, and I was like, I don't like it in color. I like the stark
black and white.
So I went back. Like, I read 2 pages of the color. They called it, like, the Master Edition, where Eddie Campbell went in and recolored the whole thing.
Wow.
And I'm like, yeah, it doesn't work for me. I like the black and white.
To touch on the art a little bit, I think what he did originally paints a better picture, because you have to look at how he's portraying the picture with the lines coming, like,
yeah.
It's kind of like almost like a charcoal painting throughout. Like, it's very messy, but like the parts that need detail are exquisitely done. Like, full detail, and it's like, I think that paints a better picture in the long run and gives you that more full emotion. Where if you just see it in color, you'd be like, oh, that's grotesque, or oh, it's raining, or this. But like, I like having to be able to interpret what he's trying to portray in black and white.
Yeah, and it's just like the perfect encapsulation of that dirty London.
Oh, yes.
Another weird, kind of interesting plot point is Inspector Aberline meets Mary Kelly.
Yeah.
And they both give kind of a false identity. She gives a fake name, and he doesn't want to be known as an inspector, so he says he's a saddle maker. Which leads to a really funny conversation where she's like, what's wrong, love? And he's like, oh, it's just this case giving me trouble. And she's like, oh, I thought you make saddles. You make cases too? And I really wanted him to just, like, go on this really funny train where he's like, well, you know, this case, it's rough around the edges. Some of the pieces are coming off. And it just has to, like, keep circling back to him, like, trying to make sense out of this.
I love her first comment when he says he's a saddle maker, and he's like, well, you got some pretty hands for a saddle maker. And he's like, I mean, look.
So, yeah, they strike up like a little bit of a relationship. It isn't ever quite romantic, even though it seems like he wants it to be.
Yes.
Even though he's married. But like at that time, marriage was just a formality. It didn't seem like anyone really particularly liked their spouse.
Nope, didn't seem like it.
So he had kind of a vested interest in her, and when she suddenly disappears, he's heartbroken.
Yes.
But he doesn't link her to the lady who was killed just yet.
Yeah.
He thinks she just, like, ditched him.
Yep.
Which, it doesn't ever really have a huge payoff.
Not really.
But I think he eventually learns that was the woman, and then he's, like, just shocked that, like, oh my god, she was the one that I was just investigating the butchering of.
Yes, yeah.
And in that last killing, this is where, as we said, Gull just reaches, like, his zenith. And then afterwards, he's almost like, he's on a come down.
Yeah.
Where he's like, I did my life's work. There's only descent from here. Yeah. And he's just like, he's depressed. He's like, well, I did it. I got climbed to the top of the mountain and there was nothing left for me.
Right.
And at this point, it gets a little bit more into the investigation where we meet Robert Lees.
Yes.
Who looked up to William Gull. He was an inspiration to him. And Gull, like, blew him off. So Lee had a grudge against him.
Yeah.
And when he ended up speaking with Aberline, he was like, I'll fucking show him. I'm gonna make it seem like he's the killer.
Yes.
And he says, like, yeah, maybe we should go inspect William Gull. He's a suspect. They go in there, and they're like, yeah, sorry, sir. We
it's
need
just
to talk
a formality.
Yep.
Someone said you might be the killer?
Yep, need to talk to you. And he says,
well, I did do it.
And they're just like,
and even me, so this is the first time I'd seen the book. Exactly. So this came as a shock to myself. But he's like, no, I did it. What are you going to do about it? The queen told me to do it. What are you going to do? Jog on, mates.
Yeah. And they're like, we're going to need you to come with us. He's like, yes, sir.
Yeah.
And off he goes.
Yeah.
And they bring him in, but everyone is in the queen's pocket, so they don't quite know what to do with him, and eventually they hold, like, a trial or a judgment at the Masonic Temple.
Yes.
And they judge him, insane. Mm-hmm. He mucked it all up. So they're going to sentence him to an insane asylum.
Yeah.
And he's like, you don't understand what I'm doing. He's like, I have no peers here.
This is higher power.
God told me to do this. I've transcended, and it's above your pay grade.
Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. They are orchestrating so many things behind the scenes. Like, they had a guy, poor Mr. Druitt, gets
a patsy. They find a guy to frame up on this. Who may have had pedophilic tendencies. Yeah. You weren't quite sure, but...
The thing is, like, they were like, we need a loner, we need a guy who might want to commit suicide, and they find this guy, and they were like, well, let's put some laudanum in him, throw some bricks in his pocket, and toss him off a bridge. Yeah. And they do it, and they just kill this poor guy for...
Yeah, and they're like, oh, hey, Jack the Ripper's dead.
Yeah.
We did it, everybody. High five. Yeah. Meanwhile, they ship away the real killer.
Under, like, a different name.
Yeah, Thomas Mason, they call him.
Yeah.
And he lives out the rest of his days in an insane asylum, which is, I think, the ultimate irony is, as he dies... An orderly and a nurse are just fucking in front of him.
So that had to be one of my favorite. At the end, you're just like, this is the funniest shit ever. So he's about to die, zooms in on his eyeball, and this guy are like, you want to fuck? And they're like, yeah, man! And they start fucking. And then it goes through this whole, like, him transcending through, like, to heaven.
Yes, this is the moment where he becomes God as he sees himself.
He sees all of these gods.
He goes into the future, he goes into the past, he goes all across London in different time periods. And I thought a really interesting thing is he inspires real-life creatives and legends at that time.
Yeah.
It shows him Spook, Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yeah.
And then he goes and wakes up from the nightmare of seeing him and writes Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Well, I like that he also gets a painting from, like, William Blake.
Yes.
Is inspired, and they do it like...
The Ghost of the Flea is the painting.
Exactly. And they do it exactly how it is in the book.
Yeah,
where
so his
Robert Blake,
is
like,
just
sees him and he's like,
influencing all these things.
What?
Yes.
And then he's like, let me draw this for you real quick. And then he sketches it out, and then they show the picture.
Oh, he opened his mouth.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a spot-on picture. So he thinks he's, like, giving all of this to, like, future people or people of the time for their creative works and stuff like that. And
Giving birth to the 20th century.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I love that it goes to the place in Ireland where Mary Kelly is with all the kids.
She escaped. It was another woman that was killed, and no one knew it.
Yeah, so she's living in Ireland like she would with kids named after all of her
deceased friends.
Her friends. And I love that he's like, I don't know this woman, so I'm leaving. And she's like, go back to hell!
Gone. Go back to hell, devil.
Yes.
And then he, like, sucks back in and dies.
Yep. And I love that.
Whoa. What a trip.
It's just so funny because, like, it starts with his eyeball, seeing these two people effing right in front of him, and then it closes out on him, like, in the corner, his eyeball, two people effing right in front of him. You're like, what a weird, stupid way to go.
What a perfect way for a guy that was killing hookers and was just afraid of women his whole life to die right in the company of two people fucking.
Yes.
I also love it. We didn't touch on this yet, but at the very beginning, in the chapter that goes through his life, it shows all these snapshots. And none of them come full circle until the end.
Yes.
Where it's like some of them are like the orderlies ushering him into the insane asylum.
Yep.
And some of them are him and his wife like having sex for the first time upon their marriage. And she's like, oh, it's too big. Get it out of me. And then he's like, and she's like, what'd you say?
I just made a sound.
I just made a little sound. He says. So this man has very serious issues with women throughout.
But if you ask him, he's perfectly fine and he's above them all.
Yep. Man, I really enjoyed that last chapter. How it went into like all these real like people and accounts of seeing strange apparitions around London. And more was like, hey, maybe it was Jack the Ripper. That'd be cool, huh?
Yeah. What's funny is if you've heard, I want to kind of get into the more realistic, like the real pulls from this, because it's when I heard of Jack the Ripper, I thought of it more as like a big, more grandeur thing. Like, but this book was like Jack the Ripper was Jack the Ripper was barely like it was. One of the many nicknames that was given to him, like he was like, "Oh, it's a leather apron," or it's this, or it's.
And it was given to him apparently by just some journalists that wanted to like cook up a story and like sell papers.
That was
and
actually
then it prompted everyone to like send in shit like notes from Jack the Ripper,
exactly,
kind of like in Zodiac and all that, where it's just like everyone wants to just get a piece of that.
Yeah. So I went to I just Wikipedia'd some of this because all of these are based off of real life people, and the William Gull they have looks exactly like the William Gull in real life. Like, they have his, like, full portrait. All of, like, the actual crime scene photos.
Yeah,
and
that last
they
one,
actually have
Lord.
one of the last one, and it is, like, I nearly regret looking at it. It is the most, one of the most disturbing pictures I've literally looked at. And it's disgusting. And
It's one of those crimes that has achieved such a notoriety that you don't even think of it as real anymore.
And that's how I thought of it.
Wow. Yeah. Like, you just, it's Jack the Ripper.
It's
the
legend.
Boogeyman.
It's legend, yeah.
Yep.
No.
But the work that Alan Moore put into this is insane. Like, this collection ends with 46 pages of annotations where he goes panel by panel and basically says, like, well, I got this information from this book and this historical account, and just basically fact checks everything he does. And he's lighthearted about it, where he's like, this part I made up, but I did it because this and this happened, and this puts this person at this place at this time. And it's bewildering how much time he must have spent researching this. And to think, he probably looks at comics today where, like, Jeff Lemire's out here writing, like, 7 books a month, and Moore is there just breaking a stack of pencils.
Like, I did a whole annotation on every single panel, and you're just gonna write some...
You're just gonna make it up.
Make it up?
I read this in high school, as I said. I got it for Christmas one year. After seeing the movie, because I liked the movie, and I was like, I kind of want to read the book.
Yeah.
And it was too much for me at that time, where it's like, I'm not it. It's too deep.
It's
too
pretty
dense
deep.
to tackle.
It's very wordy. And
I did it, and I was like, it's okay. And then when I heard everyone saying, like, it's his best, I was like, really? Like, I didn't like it that much. But it prompted me to reread it, and on this reread, I fucking ate it up. Like,
I did too.
I must be at the point in my life where I'm like, I am all for it.
I'm all in it.
I wanted more. Like, I was just thinking, like, what other, like, true crime series can I get into?
I agree.
Because it was really interesting. I wanted more. I wanted to go down that rabbit hole. And he even does, like, he does a second annotation or a second epilogue to this where they talk about, like, how many people have tried to solve this. And everyone has theories, and he presents a very comical take on this.
Yes.
Where, like, they're just stepping over each other, and it's muddying the waters. And at this point, like, no one can possibly explain this.
No.
And it's at the point, it's just like, whatever you think it is, that's what it is. Because no one can disprove or prove it anymore.
With the information that's actually out there today for it, it's your best guess.
Yep.
You could have done it.
Yeah, right. And he even acknowledges, like, my book is fiction. It's fiction. It's fiction based on the facts I had. And, like, from this other book by a Knight, Stephen Knight, I think was the author, he pulled a lot of this from. But he's like, some of it's disproved. So who knows? Like, this is just my story. And it's a great story.
It's so good.
This is what I want to believe is a Jack the Ripper
I
thing. If someone
agree.
asks me, like, who did it? I'm like, fucking William Gull, man. I read the book and I saw the movie.
Exactly. He did it in both.
Yeah. Made a strong case.
You know, as far as people, like the people were saying online, like, From Hell is such a good book. Holy cow, I couldn't agree more. Like, it's one of the best Alan Moore books I think I've read. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, Watchmen's up there. Like, Watchmen's brilliant. And, honestly, Watchmen gets into the whole time thing, too.
The Dr. Manhattan thing is very similar to the William Gull thing.
It's so interesting. But, like, this is so well done, so well thought out. And the whole chapter of Gull taking Netley around, where he ends up vomiting, had me glued to the pages.
Me too. I hated it the first time I read it. I was like, how long is this? And I was dreading that on the second read, but on this one I was like, this is great.
It's so good.
Like, I know what I'm in for, but, like, this is flying by and I'm really into this history.
So, what I found very funny is that, like, so Alan Moore, is, with an exception to William Gull, who's a very educated person, you can read everything he says very clearly. He talks very well. everybody else he writes is extremely British.
Cockney.
So, Cockney, like, he's writing ear, like, apostrophe E-R.
Oh,
like, it's, sometimes it gets...
God, when he brings in the Elephant Man.
Oh,
you almost have to read it out loud and record yourself and play it back and, like, listen phonetically to it.
I think halfway through his conversation with him, I was like, I don't know what he's trying to say.
This guy.
I can't make this out. But, like, it made me, like, just crave to hear him write William Gull.
Yeah.
Like, he just... It is complete bullshit what he's saying. Like, just the most ridiculous things. But it's
he
like...
believes it so adamantly.
So entrancing. Like, it's so amazing how he's talking about all of these different gods and all of this and how they're so important. Jubila.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
Oh, man. So, all in all, From Hell... a masterpiece.
Absolutely. Worth the read for sure.
Man, we've been reading some good stuff this year.
We sure have.
And we'd be remiss if we didn't briefly touch on the film.
Yeah.
Which came out in...
2001.
2001, yep. This is a 1-2 punch from 20th Century Fox. They also adapted League of Extraordinary Gentlemen and turned more off adaptations of his work entirely. Yes. But I will say, I found the From Hell movie quite enjoyable. It is not a direct adaptation of his work, but it's as close as you can maybe make a movie on something like this.
Yeah, for taking 500 pages and cramming it into 120 minutes, I don't think you can get much better.
In a movie with Johnny Depp and Heather Graham, where, like, you have to take some liberties there, and, like, people are seeing this for them. You gotta have, like, a little romantic subplot and all this. But, like, they stayed pretty true to the gist of this.
More true than I thought they were.
Direct lines and sequences.
Yeah.
And there were moments where I'm like, wow, I'm glad they put that in.
Same.
Like, that was great in the book, and they did it in the movie.
I agree. There are obviously consolidations of characters, like Detective Aberline and Lee's are blended into the same person, but I think that works specifically for the movie.
Especially since Lee's doesn't show up until the very end of the book.
And when we say very end, the very end of the book.
The second to last chapter. Yeah. And again, like, they're two different mediums. Like, this book is not written to be action-packed.
Nope.
And a movie... with this star power and everything, had to give a little bit more drama to it.
Right.
And I think, like, they balanced it pretty well. I know, like, maybe the Alan Moore fans will say that's blasphemy, but if you just step back and look at it as its own story of, like, a Jack the Ripper tale that took a lot of good things that Alan Moore created.
Right.
I think it's a solid piece.
I agree. I 100% agree. I think it's worth the watch if you're looking for something of this nature. For about, like, Jack the Ripper. I think it does it enough justice to make it worth a watch.
Yeah. If you read the book, you owe it to yourself to watch the movie. Like, see what they do with it. You'd be surprised what makes it in. The Elephant Man makes an appearance.
It sure does!
And it didn't need to, but I was like, oh, cool that they put that in.
Interesting. Obviously, like, the book is like, hey, here's Jack the Whipper, right here. That's the guy who does it.
And in the movie, it's a mystery.
Obviously, they want to make it a little mystery, but, like, I would say if you haven't read the book, you'd be like, oh, okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I read the book and then immediately watched the movie. I'm like, that's the guy right there.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
It's Ian Holm. He did it.
Ian. And I did the reverse. I saw the movie first, and it prompted me to want to read the book. And I was way too young at the time to really appreciate it. But looking back, I can enjoy them both as separate entities.
That's a good way to do it. I think that's a great.
Hey, the movie, it gave us the absinthe.
It gave us the absinthe we're drinking here.
So there's that.
There's that. Our brains are pickled. We are going to be hallucinating here anytime.
Any moment. Couldn't get our hands on any opium.
No.
Unfortunately.
Sorry,
guys. If you can get some opium, send us some DMs.
Get us in the Discord.
Yep, get us in the Discord. Join the Patreon. Yep. Free access to the Discord.
Yep.
Neil, any final thoughts on From Hell?
I think From Hell, honestly, as I said before, one of my favorite Alan Moore books, believe it or not. I think the artwork is fantastic. Can't give any more shout-outs to that. Just wonderful. Definitely read it if you're into that murder mystery type thing that's got some real basis in history.
Yeah, man. Dense and complete.
Correct.
When you finish this, you're full.
Yeah, you sigh of relief. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's a 5-star book.
Yes, absolutely. Definitely check it out.
As long as you know what you're getting into, and you're ready for like a little bit of homework. It feels a bit like homework.
But
it's a homework that you're happy to take part in.
I was gonna say, it made me want to look into the real life thing of it. Because if you know that going in, or if you discover that coming out of it, it made me want to research it more.
You shut the book and you're like, I'm gonna solve those fucking Jack the Ripper
you know what? I'm gonna start a podcast and solve this fucking thing.
Yep. Move over, cereal. Oh, man. So, that's it.
Yep.
If you enjoyed what you heard here, there's plenty more of that. And
absolutely.
If you care to support the show, you can do so at our Patreon, Patreon/IMPERIUS REX.
Plenty of exclusive content to be had.
That's right. Great rewards. And you can join our Discord, which is free to all Patreon members, where we just BS throughout the day, talk about shit like From Hell, cooking up our own Jack the Ripper theories.
You know it.
Among other things. So, thank you for watching.
Yes.
I have been Ghost Hunter Dave.
And Dinosaur Neil.
And we'll catch you next time. Good day.
Yeah, maybe it's because I haven't read or written in cursive in years, but there was a point where people would write letters, and I'm like, I don't think I can read this.
I don't think I can read this. Is there an audio book of this?
Yeah.